All right. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to Finding Your HR Advocacy Voice podcast. My name is Tracy Justice. And and well, I will say I am the Director of Government Affairs for the IndySHRM local chapter. And here is my co-host, the Advocacy Pro for sure, Chris Schrader, who is the Director of Government Affairs for HR Indiana SHRM for the state level. So, hey, how you doing, Chris?
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
Looks like I'm back on the lag again now.
You know what? Yeah, I
Yeah,
wonder.
sorry
You
about that.
And because I would hate, sometimes the background can do that, but let's see if we can kind
Let
of
me
get
go
away with
ahead
it.
and let me go ahead and end the background and see
Yeah,
if that see if
because
that.
sometimes it takes a little bit of the bandwidth, but I love that. So we've got to figure out a way to how to.
Let's see. I think do I have to go back or wait a minute? Here we go.
Okay. So then while you're doing that, you know what? I'll go ahead and show the disclaimer. Right. So as Chris is taking care of that. So what we want to make sure is that that this podcast is provided for community building, educational purposes, and public policy awareness. We are not going to provide you any legal interpretation nor any statement of policies. Really, this is a space for us to be able to talk about the policies that we're seeing that impact HR and an opportunity for you to kind of get those conversations going, but we are not your definitive place to make that final say so if you decide a decision needs to be made, right? And so we definitely want to make sure that that this is not something that is provided by IndySHRM or HR IndySHRM at this moment, but this is something Chris and I have have shared to provide this space. So let's go ahead and add you back on,
Sure.
Chris.
Well, very
Okay.
good. All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks. Yeah, I think getting rid of that background definitely helped the streaming quality. Right. Well, thank you very much, Tracy. And so I
Yes.
basically wanted to cover loosely 4 topics today. First, I want to talk about the Indiana General Assembly, which is currently in its session and now in the second half of that session. And so they'll be closing out at the end of March, first week of April, I believe, is when it is. And so they have
March 14th.
They still have March 14th. So they're down to basically 4 odd weeks to get the work done. And so I want to talk a little bit about bills there. Then I want to talk about some actions that some of the states around us have taken that have implications for Indiana. Then I want to move to the federal side of the House.
Yes.
Both the House of Representatives and the Senate, and then have some news on some agency work that's being done. And then we'll wrap up talking about the primaries and the implications of those. So packed show today as always. So I want to start first with the Indiana General Assembly.
Yes, and then I definitely want to say hi to our viewers. So if there's any questions or comments that you want to make, definitely do not hesitate. This is your chance to do that. So definitely wanted to recognize viewers. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Thanks for hopping in there, Tracy. I apologize. Yeah. So anyway, so got some really good news for the HR pros of the state. All of the bills that I was tracking that were in the hopper, and Tracy was good enough to help me this year and sort through those bills. And so we went through both the Senate and the House bills to look at the bills that might cause us trouble or the bills that would help us. Unfortunately, the bills that would give us trouble always outnumber the bills that would help. But nonetheless, we went through those, and I'm pleased to report that none of the bills that I would have had any concern about survived. None of them got a hearing. None of them even got a hearing, as a matter of fact, which is what I projected would happen. And so,
really, why did you project that none of them would get the hearing?
Because this is a short session. There's only so many hearing days to have before you have to have votes. There was a lot of legislation in the hopper. And against that backdrop, knowing those committee chairs as I do, that I just did not see them picking up those bills. Quite frankly, I don't think they would have picked up most of them, even if it had been the long session.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I don't think in all the years I've been doing this, I'm trying to think. Yeah. I don't think that any of the bills to raise Indiana's minimum wage have ever received a hearing.
Okay.
And
Okay. Okay.
that's largely because it's the policy of the state that the state's minimum wage will always be the federal minimum wage. So if the feds change, Indiana changes. If the feds don't, then Indiana doesn't. So that's the main reason for that. Like everything else in Indiana, that's a direct outgrowth of Indiana's economic development posture.
Mhm.
Much of the
Okay.
legislation, much of the posture that you see toward the legislature and how the lens through which the legislature views most of the legislation comes before this, is this going to make us more or less competitive for businesses to come to Indiana and locate. So
Okay.
that wage is one of those issues. So they didn't get a hearing. Great news for us. I'm sure they'll be
Okay.
reincarnated as they always are in the next General Assembly, but that's next January. I'm not going to worry about it till then.
Okay. So there weren't any bills that we wanted to actually go through the process and get the hearing, and none?
No, there was nothing that we really needed, right? That we were really pushing on. Um, Usually when it comes to us, the stuff we would really like technical corrections and reform of the FMLA would require Congress, not the Indiana General Assembly.
Okay.
Right? So yeah. Some of the things, I really can't think of some of the things we'd want in the state that usually gets done, right? I mean, it's stuff around workers' comp or unemployment funds or whatever, things like that. Those are usually a long time coming, well studied, well calculated, figured out. I mean, I've never really had a problem with any of those, but
Okay.
no. So that stuff is gone now. A couple of bills are. There was one bill that really I was not worried about because I did not
Mhm.
think there was any way it would move. And this is what's called an insurance assignment bill. Okay. So this
Insurance
one,
assignment?
insurance assignment, yeah, assignment of
Okay.
benefits is what it is, assignment of benefits. So as we all
Oh,
know
okay.
in HR, we primarily work in a loosely managed care environment in the sense that employee choice around the physicians they see and where they see them and things like that is largely determined by the network that we choose to contract with to provide those services. And we usually try to come up with a broad network. And in some areas like Bloomington, Indiana, where IU Health owns everything, the PPO is basically IU Health doctors, which is like almost all of them, but like 10 people. Right?
Mhm.
So we're familiar with those, right? And we strike those deals so that we have predictability in knowing the charges that we're going to be assigned for services, right? We know what a doctor's is going to cost me. These are all contractual arrangements. Okay.
Yes.
So when you do an assignment of benefits bill, what you're basically saying is, I am allowed, provider, I'm the provider, I'm allowed to hop
Okay.
over that entire arrangement and bill directly to the insurance company the true costs that I have for bearing this, right? And so about every other year, like clockwork, the dentists always want to do this. It's always the dentist. It's been the dentist for like 20 years. They always want to do this.
Okay.
And I think it's because oftentimes you've heard of DMOs, dental maintenance organizations or things like that.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So they hate those. They hate those. And I don't blame them. That's not my point.
Okay.
But
Because they feel there's a middleman taking
ones trying to say, hey, listen, we're not being compensated fairly for our stuff. And so we want to do this. And indeed, there's a dental assignment bill kicking around, in the House. No, that one's in the Senate, but I don't think it made it. But the one that shocked me that did make it, this one got voted on and cleared the House. And I was just like, how did that happen?
Okay.
And I failed to take into account the story around the bill. Okay. So it's not just the technical aspects about how a law is designed or any of that. Whether or not there are certain bills that just need a compelling story to move along, right? You see this a lot of times in insurance stuff. Before the Affordable Care Act, what did an insurance plan have to cover? And so you used to see all these laws that would say, well, you got to cover this thing, and it's because the next door neighbor of the legislator had this medical condition and insurance didn't pay for it. And so, they want that fixed so it doesn't happen to anybody else.
Yes.
You used to see that all the time before the Affordable Care Act was passed, and then no more.
Okay.
But the Affordable Care Act is about medical, not dentist, right? So a lot of people forget that.
This bill, dental bills, assignment.
The Affordable Care Act had nothing to say about dentists. Yeah. So I was kind of looking at that one, right? Because the dentists are well organized and they always show up and testify. I mean, they're a not insignificant lobby, right, at the legislature. Okay. And so I missed this one. And that's because this one was about an ambulance company being able to do direct cost. And this involves, in particular, rural ambulances. Okay. So one of the challenges in Indiana is rural medical care. It's hard to acquire. It's not terribly accessible. Oftentimes the services available in our deeply rural areas, they don't have a ton of doctors. They have to go 2 counties over to get to a regional hospital. It's difficult.
And I heard of that.
Difficult.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And that comes part and parcel with living in a rural area and living at distance, right? And I'm not being critical of that. I'm just saying that creates certain challenges in delivery of care, access, things like that, borne by geography and distance. That's my only comment.
Yes.
So one of the issues is getting an ambulance out to a rural area and then getting said person to wherever they need to go in time to be able to do it. And so when you look at rural ambulances, very, very different than urban, because urban will really involve typically relatively short trips, right? Mm-hmm. So you make your run, you take them to Wishart, you drive back to the station house, or you drive back to where you are, and you're out of pocket for an hour or so, but nonetheless, you're ready to go next. Mm-hmm. Whereas a rural ambulance going out and taking somebody all the way to a regional hospital or something like that, you could be talking the better part of 2 hours, right? So just when you think about how many you need, well, you need more than you have, but you can only afford so many, so you can see where this goes, right? It's a cost-heavy environment. And so the ambulances are saying, look, the insurance reimbursement we're getting isn't cutting it. And so we need to be able to charge what we need to charge to stay going, or, the threat's the wrong word. That's wrong. They're not threatening. They are sharing that that may make rural ambulance just not something they can afford to do. So for a rural legislator, right? Because if you went to a rural legislator and said, hey, you guys can't afford to have the ambulances, so I hope nobody in your county needs to get to regional hospital. Or if they do, I hope they have transportation. See what I mean? So
that's a compelling story. Yes.
I didn't think that bill all the way through when I saw it in terms of the implications if that argument was made. Right. The coin didn't drop in my head that was a rural ambulance company. That was my bet. Right. That's the part I missed. I didn't realize it was a rural ambulance company. And so normally the legislature can be counted on not to do assignment of benefit stuff. So assignment of benefit bill comes up and the chamber hops up and jumps all over it. And Indiana Manufacturers Association hops up and jumps all over it. And quite frankly, for all of these years, I haven't really had to jump into that fight because those guys are so effective at it. And so they did jump into it and lost. And so at that point, I was like, what? So the concern here, you see, is that the bill might involve a rural ambulance company, but you don't pass laws just for rural. If you're an urban ambulance company, you're going to make an equal treatment argument, right? And say, well, wait a minute, if these guys get to do it, why are we stuck? On our pay schedule. Yes. So then now you're talking our costs. Now we're getting into employer costs. Now this is in the HR kitchen, right? Because all of a sudden, we thought we had contracts that controlled costs, and it turns out that maybe that's not true. So I'm going to have to get activated here. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to approach this yet, but I didn't forecast this one coming. So I have to think about this.
Wow,
is
so
going to
which bill? Which bill?
I forget the name. I forget the name of the bill. I know it's going to Health and Provider Services in the Senate.
Health and Provider Services. Okay.
I forget the bill number now. I'll look it up. I'll look up later because
I heard say you need to activate. You're probably going to have to activate some of us HR advocates. Is that what?
Well, certainly me. Well, now I've got to talk to the board and say, is this one we want to testify on, take a position on, and stuff like that? Because I don't cowboy it, right? The board's got to. Or at least I should say the board, but my boss, and the director of HR IndySHRM, has got to sign off. But I hadn't put this one on their radar, so I still have to do that, and then we'll see, and then whatever they sign off on is what I'll do. So
I know. Like ambulances, like for example, the cost is $250, right? Like at least with Medicare. Like if Medicare, I know that it's always $250.
But Medicare controls the cost. See, what Medicare does is go to the provider and say, I don't care what you think it costs. And quite frankly, I don't care what it costs. This is what you're getting, not a penny more.
That's right.
Now you can do that if you're Uncle Sam and you got the weight of Medicare and all this other stuff. But the individual employer community doesn't have that kind of stroke. And so instead, we got to band together on things or whatnot. And that's where, because what happens is we all know how this works, right? We've always known how this works. The federal government walks in, says, this is what I'm going to pay you. The providers, the hospitals, everybody else is like, well, that isn't enough. And they say, so. And then they turn right around and take whatever the heck it was they were shorted on that one and shove it on us. That's how it's always.
Wow.
So it just gets transferred from the public responsibility to the private responsibility.
So employers can, if this all the way through, this is that employers may see an increase in their benefits dollars because of this added
that's my whole point. Now, because then you can't really put these people under contract. They could just bill directly for what they say it is, right? And I'm not saying that they would be lying about what it costs. As a matter of fact, I've got no reason to disbelieve anything that they're saying about the cost of rural ambulance. I'm not.
Geographically, it makes sense.
I don't have any basis for arguing against that. I don't know enough. But what I do know is if you get to do assignment of benefits and then you get to hop by all the contractual stuff that we do to control our costs, then that's a problem. So the problem for me isn't whether or not we should spend more money on rural ambulance care. That's not in our field of interest in HR. What I'm worried about is the assignment of benefit piece where you hop right over the contract to then get into higher costs for us. And common sense says to me, if this goes, the urban, in the very next session, the urban ambulance companies are going to be
saying yes.
Well,
and it's going to set precedents. Yeah, it's going to set precedents for something else.
If I were them, and I'm not them, I wear the HR jersey, not the ambulance jersey. But if I were them, I would say, hey, why would what's so materially different between them and us, except we drive shorter distance. I mean, we have costs, we have all this stuff, right? So anyway, that was one I did not. That's one I didn't see coming. You and I never even talked about. That's how not coming I saw it. That I didn't even talk about it with you. So
I
anyway,
track that one.
So odd things happen every session or so. You just kind of shake your head and you go, how did that happen? And this is one of them. So be it. Just now we just gotta figure out what to do in the Senate. So, but that's the only thing. That's the only thing. The one thing that is eating up a lot of oxygen is this bill to regulate the universities, the institutions of higher learning in the state, and basically, for all intents and purposes, do away with tenure and require universities to go to basically a 3 or a 5 year contract model. for their instructors, for their professors.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That sounds
Yeah, so the
so
universities
do
are,
away with tenure. Yes, I don't fully
yeah.
understand the full benefits of tenure, but it sounds if you for
Well,
quite a time,
the benefits,
then
well, the tenure tenure was designed to preserve the right of a professor to do research and teach and say controversial or non commonly accepted standards and ways of doing things, right? And so
real
it was,
okay.
yeah, so it was meant to do that. Okay, so that was the original purpose of
Okay.
tenure, so that a professor, university couldn't say, "Hey, you shouldn't be talking like that. You shouldn't be advocating like you shouldn't teach that. You shouldn't research that. Do that, and we'll fire you." And so
Mhm.
the tenure was designed, in essence, to protect academic integrity and academic free speech. Okay, so
Okay.
that's
Okay.
why it was designed. That's why it was designed, and as a result, it makes it almost
Okay.
impossible to fire a professor.
You
Almost
I always
impossible.
heard
I mean,
the word, but never knew exactly what it meant. That's funny. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
10
you
okay, so
can't
that's what
fire. I mean,
that's designed to do.
yeah, unless they have an inappropriate relationship with a student or steal or do drugs openly in class or something. I mean, you would really have to go a long way to get fired once you get
Okay.
tenure. It's just almost impossible, which is how it was designed, so that it preserved the right of that
Mhm.
individual to do bold things. So what this General Assembly is concerned with, and by the way, this isn't the only other General Assembly doing something like this. This is all across the nation. There
Well,
are a
I
lot
figured
of,
that after I heard you say that. It has a
yeah,
lot to do with
and,
climate,
and
right?
so
Political climate. Mhm.
it's not political climate.
No.
I can say this as a person who teaches at Indiana University. Now, I'm not a professor. I
Okay.
don't have tenure. I'm an adjunct
Okay.
instructor, and I teach at the university semester to semester. They can choose not to renew my contract, and I can't do anything about it. I have no protection. Now, they've renewed my contract every year for 23 years, so I must be doing something right. But it's semester to semester to
But you
semester, right? Which is fine
okay.
by me.
Mhm.
So they can basically effectively decide to fire me by not offering me a contract. Just let me finish out the semester. And Chris, we don't really see a spot for you anymore. And they're not obligated to offer me a contract. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the world I live in. Having said that, I am able to observe the world around me. And I
Mhm.
can tell you that when it comes to the university and its professors, and this isn't going to shock anybody listening, um, there are very few dissenting voices about much of anything. Instead, what I see is a tremendous amount of orthodoxy, and everybody singing from the same sheet of music and the same point of view. Okay, now I'm
Okay.
not arguing that point of view or right or is wrong. I'm just giving you an observation
Okay.
of what I see. So if tenure is supposed to provide these rogue voices, but really envisioned was like this collision of these great minds, where Einstein's arguing against somebody else about the theory of relativity and who has proven
Interesting.
what. And I mean,
Okay.
'cause keep in mind, every single great person we've talked about was generally regarded as absolutely loony bins through most of their
Well,
life.
because you have to be kind of crazy, right, when your mind can
Well,
stretch that much, and
when you're that
yeah, you
freaking
come off a
brilliant,
little.
you're
Yeah.
working on a different plane.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, you're
So
just in
yeah.
rarefied air where there's probably only, 1,000 people on the whole planet that can even keep up with what the heck you're talking about. Right. I mean, so yes, of course, they're always thought of crazy, always have been. Da Vinci, Copernicus, you
Mhm.
name it. I mean, anybody that ever had real great breakthroughs and invented great things was generally regarded
You're a
as a
little
really babbling idiot.
unusual, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta be. Uh-huh.
So tenure kind of envisioned, right, that there'd be these fights and they were designed to shackle the university administration, who they figured would be political creatures, or at least ones with their fingers in the wind when it came to raising money or really anything else. And if they had an uncomfortable professor saying uncomfortable things, that it just might be really convenient for them to fire that person and collect the donor money. And so tenure was designed to prevent that.
Oh,
Okay, so that
okay. Oh my gosh. I'm
so that's the purpose.
teaching me, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the purpose of tenure.
Goodness.
So anyway, this bill
Okay.
has come up. Now, I don't know whether it will pass or not, but all of the universities, all the colleges, all the teachers are just going absolutely bonkers over this. So we'll see. That's what I meant about it. That's the thing consuming oxygen right now in this session. Right now, a lot of the stuff is going on. Bill advances, hearings are being held. The news never talks about them because this is the sexy story, right, of the of this year's session. So it's eating up all the media and everything. But HR doesn't have a dog in it. So I'm just observing it, right? But we don't have a dog in that fight. So.
Because HR would pretty much be the ones who would have to, I guess, kind of make sure everyone understands.
That's an academic affairs issue. I mean, even HR.
Oh, so HR wouldn't even be involved in that process whatsoever?
HR at any university stays the heck away from the professorate.
Okay.
No, other than maybe investigating claims or policy, stuff like that. I mean, they do stuff like that. But if hiring professors, no, that belongs to the schools. Disciplining the professors belongs to the schools. Oh yeah. HR's got everybody else, but not that
part. Okay.
No. And again, that goes back to the original idea of you're giving this protection so that these great minds in an unfettered fashion can do controversial things if they so desire.
That is just, it's really amazing. I didn't realize that that's what that meant. But okay, so but it is sort of a political tool, maybe not.
No,
it's not a
political tool.
Not a political tool, but it's to make sure that those that come in.
Yeah, it was an academic tool. And it's designed as such. And I'm saying, keep in mind, I'm telling you what it was designed for and how it is supposed to work.
Why do they away with it? What is the idea behind doing away with it? Why is it that something that
I just said? There's no collision of great minds. There's just an accepted orthodoxy with everybody singing from the same sheet of music with the same point of view. So what the legislature is saying, well, if there's no collision, if you don't have to protect anybody because nobody's at risk, everybody's on the same page, everybody's saying the same thing. Well, what are we protecting? Why would you just the other thing the legislature wants is, quite frankly, the ability of the university to fire somebody if they feel like they need to.
Okay.
And that's again the reason why the professors are complaining. It's like, hey, what if I become inconvenient to the president because I'm saying things the president is doing? I wrote an op-ed that said the president is violating Indiana's open door rule or something like that. And you can fire me for that? Well, if this bill passes, probably not fire them right away, but don't have to renew their contract in 3 or 5 years.
Wow.
See what I mean?
I know it's not really HR, but it just seems like, why can't they just leave it alone?
I mean, contracts and things like that.
Yeah.
Are within our field of understanding. But again, this isn't an HR thing because HR.
Yeah.
We have our hands. HR advocates, me in particular, have our hands full with the stuff that's just ours as it is.
Yes.
Without going afield to other things. I'm just saying that I'm just explaining to you and answering your questions. What's going on, why it's happening, etc. Whether it passes or not has the votes. I have no.
Now, real quick, then.
Yeah.
Now, there is another law that the Indiana General Assembly, I think Senate bill, is called the Happy Hour Bill.
I didn't understand what you said.
It's called the Happy Hour Bill from the Senate.
Yeah. No, this one passed. That's going to go. This is, Indiana has always had a ton of rules around drinking, right? And so, keep in mind, it took us better part of 75 years to legalize alcohol sales on Sunday, but only after 12 noon. So, we didn't sell alcohol on Sunday forever, right? Forever. And so this, again, it was a reflection of the ability for bars and establishments like that to set differentiation of prices relative to alcohol, to have a reduced price at happy hour. So if you've noticed in Indiana, if you went to Ohio or Illinois and you went to a bar and they say happy hour, draft beers, draft this or whatever is $1 a glass between 5 and 6 or 4 and 5 or whatever. Usually very narrow windows, right? And so in Indiana, it's like, come in during happy hour, half price nachos, or they'll throw other stuff onto because they aren't allowed to manipulate the price. And so this bill will allow them to manipulate the price.
Okay, I thought it's that you actually carry out your drinks now. You actually take your drinks to go.
Okay. Oh, okay.
It says something about carry out. So I thought, how would that impact the workplace, right? Like,
okay, so carry out. Now that again goes back to open containers or stuff like that. And so this once again deals with sales and where you can take them. So there's a special permit you have to get if you're going to let people be on your premises, but sit outside and drink, like on the sidewalk,
Oh,
like that.
okay,
so,
okay,
yeah,
okay. See, I should have dug in a little bit more.
Bill,
okay.
Yeah, again, not what I'm tracking because it's not our stuff, but yeah, the alcohol sales in Indiana and when you can do it and where you can do it and how you can do it. Real good example. Grocery stores. Grocery stores are allowed to carry beer in Indiana. Can you buy a cold beer at Kroger's?
I don't know. Can you? I don't know.
I'll give you the answer. No, you cannot, because it's illegal for Kroger's to give it to you cold, because that is restricted solely to liquor stores who are allowed.
Liquors to guess.
Yeah. They're the only ones allowed to refrigerate.
You know what I mean? But I think this drives the point how public policy shapes every single of our life. We don't pay attention. We don't really realize, but it controls everything, shapes everything down to where you can buy.
Every single thing. Every single thing we experience, the structures we operate, everything like that sits in a piece of legislation that was passed at some point in time.
At some point. It blows my mind. I feel like the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh.
So we're about the midpoint here. So I want to switch over before I go to that. I do want to talk about Michigan. So Michigan is in there. Michigan has their General Assembly in too. And Michigan voted to overturn its right to work statute, which had been on the book for the better part of 50 odd years. And so what this means is that Michigan is no longer is no longer a right to work state. And when that happened, the business development people in Indiana popped the corks, had champagne, and clapped, because most businesses will not even look at locating in a state that is not right to work.
And right to work means that you have the right to unionize.
Right to work has the right to be a union. So in a right to work state, a worker doesn't have to join a union. A worker doesn't have to pay dues if they don't want to, or the political support part, right? So they don't have to do that. And so basically unions look at right to work states as union chilling. There's also a component in right to work that allows unions to decertify easier if they want to, meaning the workers can decertify the union and maybe go with another one or get somebody else in. So it has protections on both the labor side and the employer side. But the key point here is when it comes to economic development, most companies, when they go to the specialty outfits whose job it is to find the best place to put a plant or put a location, they will automatically take any state that is not a right to work state right off the list. So that opportunity won't even come your way. So the reason that's a big deal for Indiana is Michigan just took itself out of the competitive landscape in the Midwest. So that's one state we don't have to worry about.
So that gives us, so just to make sure that I'm understanding. So to clarify, so currently right now in this of Michigan, employees don't have a choice whether or not, they want to join a union or they have to.
So this will have to be with joining a union. This will have to do with dues. This will be the whole, right. So
it's forced upon employees. Wow.
If you look at it, it depends, okay? Because everything has to do with the
Okay.
lens you're looking through it, right? So if you're
Okay.
looking at it through the lens of a person who is an organized labor advocate, or someone perhaps who is a progressive, or even a libertarian leaning Republican, they may look at this and say, hey, labor is getting a raw deal. The workers haven't had a raise, and God knows when, in terms of purchasing power.
Okay.
And
Okay.
if they don't have a union to advocate for them, they're just going to get crumbs. And let's face it, we've seen a lot of strikes, right? We have seen
Yes.
a lot of strikes. We've seen a lot of different contracts being won and stuff like that. And so if you're coming to if you are a pro-labor person, having a right to work statute hurts workers because it prevents them. It makes it harder for them to join a union. It makes it harder for them to get union representation, and it acts as a chilling force on unions being formed. So get rid of them, right? And I would say certainly that was a sentiment in Michigan. Right.
Wow. Okay. So, okay. Wow. So I wonder, because I know that with HR, sometimes it can be a bit tricky to, work for an organization that does have all union rules and making sure that you abide by the, and
right. Well, when Indiana's right to work bill was passed, HR IndySHRM voted to support that. And we did. And I did, and advocated for that. And that was a hard bill to get across the line. And that was there was not uniform support within the body of professionals in the state. There was support from the board of directors who voted on that. But there were, I know for sure there were at least 2 members that dropped out over that very issue. They thought we were taking the wrong position. Right.
Wow.
And, but as I said at the time, I can respect that. I can utterly respect
yeah, definitely.
But bottom line, to lead is to choose. And so once you choose, then there's going to be some folks on one side and some on the other. But that's what leadership requires. Decision.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah. So that was something that happened in another state that actually is going to affect us.
Improve economic opportunities for us.
Positively, yeah. Economic opportunity for us should be. So let's move on to the federal government. So
let's find out what's going on there.
Well, it's an election season, in case you missed it. And so,
what, really?
Yeah, yeah.
And
so so you can kind of see the contours of what's going on, right? And so last couple weeks, Congress tried to get what was cast at the time, how it was referred to in the media and how it was talked about, was a bill to deal with the issues at the border, right? Because we've got a significant number of people coming in. And while that was true, like every bill in Congress, once a bill looks like it might move, because it's so hard to get legislation passed that isn't broadly bipartisan. And by the way, broadly bipartisan bills pass the U.S. Congress every day, ending in Y. We just never hear about them because they aren't fighting about them. They pass in a bipartisan fashion, or they work out the bumps or whatever the concerns are, and they just get it done. And that's the majority of legislation, which you never hear anything about. So all we hear is that Congress is dysfunctional because it doesn't solve these huge thorny problems like the border, like immigration, things like that quite frankly are significant, challenging, complex, difficult to understand. And there are broad majorities in the country who want opposing things out of that. So I always say, if the country can't agree on solving something, how are its elected representatives who represent those interests supposed to do it? You know what I mean? If everybody in my district, I was a representative and my phone lines were melting because, everybody in my district doesn't want me to vote for one thing or another. Well, I have to really take that into consideration when I vote, right? I mean,
Yes. Yes.
I'm
And
balancing
even
off the will
considering
of the
you've
people.
probably, well, I was gonna say, considering that you've probably worked out a deal with another official and said, "Hey, if you do for me,
Well,
I'll."
you probably did, and you can even be in a worse bind than that, right? Your caucus can be leaning on you and saying, "Hey, we got to push this over the line,"
Oh
and you
gosh,
say,
and your
"Yeah,
constituents.
could you let this cup pass me by? I'd like to vote no because I'd like to keep my job, and if I go
Yes,
back,
yes.
they're going to skin me alive." Yeah, so that stuff happens. But anyway, that was eating up a lot of stuff in DC. What killed the bill were a variety of things. First, it became what's referred to as a Christmas tree bill, so all kinds of things started getting thrown on it. So there was some money for defense thrown in there, which was weird. There was additional money to deal with the migrant flow. There was money for Israel. There was money for Ukraine. I mean, it was just
Just got money for everybody. Everybody gets money. Okay.
It was a mess. It was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, even though it passed the Senate, I looked at that bill coming from the Senate, and I was just like, there is just absolutely no way that the House is going to pick this thing up. The speaker.
Which bill is this talking about?
This is the bill that passed the Senate that has to do with it. It was talked about in terms of border security, but it's got like 9 different things in it, and it's written in a really weird way. And so the speaker, who I think who has been in the job like about 5 minutes by now, right? Has looked at this thing and is like, I am not going to touch this with a 10-foot freaking pole. There's any number of people who would eat me alive for even bringing this to the floor. So he's supposed to meet with the president, maybe this week, maybe next.
Oh, wow. And we're talking about Mike Johnson?
Yeah, Mike Johnson. Yeah. So maybe some kind of grand bargain is struck, hard to tell. He's got a tenuous hold on his job. Johnson does, right? So we'll see. So that part was going on. But for me, the real big news in DC is on the regulatory side. So we've been waiting forever for the Department of Labor to push out the new salary floor, right? Because they raise the salary floor. Yeah.
That's
right. They've been promising that. They've blown through at least 5 deadlines on that one. So, but they double, cross their fingers twice, whatever the heck it is. So they swear this time they mean it, and it's going to come out in April.
Is the $60,000? Is it where they change?
I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. I haven't seen the final rule yet.
Because I know last time I read it, it said it's like at 55,000, but because they were using the previous year's number, so they said that they would have to use 20. Yeah, number 20.
We just raised it by a big giant number. What was it? In the Trump administration raised it. Why? It went from like 25 to 48. Yeah, so there was a pretty healthy lead.
35 up to 30, but now 65 up to 60,000. How did
I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what it's going to be. We'll see. Put it this way. I'm very confident it's not going to be. I'm very confident that it's not going to be the 80 and 90 they had in their first iteration. In their first iteration, the 80 or greater.
But honestly, like Chris, what would we do as HR professionals, right? Because wouldn't that just be an added work? The HR professionals would have to go through to make sure that they're, designating everybody correctly. Like, what would that look like?
Well, I mean, basically, everybody be hourly except for, a couple of people, right? So, yeah. So anyway,
my mind is, I think this is like we need to ring the alarm and everybody needs to figure out what they're going to do. But it looks like this is just the done. So now it's to get ready.
That ship has already sailed, right? So they had the comment period on this a year and a half ago. And I commented on it. I was one of the people that was invited to the federal listening session on that. So I was one of the stakeholders, as they call me.
Yes.
And so I told them very politely how economically insane that was, and how the impact on the workers would be tons of exempt people who, in their mind, had worked their whole life to not have to punch the clock, would now be told to punch the clock. And even though the federal government might not think that's a terrible thing and say, hey, great, you're eligible for overtime now, I said, you got a whole lot of people who wouldn't process it that way. So anyway.
Oh, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a whole.
We're finally going to learn. We're finally going to learn what that is. April is going to be a big month. Okay. So then the other thing that's supposed to come out in April is there's going to be the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, is having its spring meeting, and they are going to vote on their final rule, which would eliminate the use of non-competition agreements in the United States.
That would eliminate the use of non-competes?
Non-competes, yes. Yeah. So that rule, I haven't seen that rule yet, but they're going to vote on it. Meaning I haven't seen the final version they're going to vote on. I have an idea of what it's going to say. Pardon me. That's not the same thing as saying that I've seen the final product. Now, I have a really good idea of what I expect, but I haven't seen the document.
Okay.
That they're going to vote on.
You share?
Yeah. For some reason, they just don't share that stuff with me. But anyway, so that's going to come out. Right. And that will be a big deal for some of us. And what I think will happen, where it's going to have the biggest impact, is on, especially in larger companies that do succession planning, stuff like that, people who are making big investments in the development of executives. You know, the non-competes and the stay bonuses and things like that were the way that you protected your investment. Right. Because if you developed an executive into being a crackerjack CEO, and then they said, thank you so very much, I'm going to go over here and work for your competitor.
Well, yeah. Right. Oh, thank you so much. Now I'm going to use it over here at this next place.
Right. And so, and so that's a common use of non-competes to try to do that. Right. And so I had argued, I had also commented on that rule and said, you know, you're basically throwing the baby with the bathwater, and you're not looking at, I could have lived with a narrower use of non-competes. What I objected to was just the blanket elimination of them, right? So at any rate, but having said that, I'm like 99.9% certain that that's exactly what they're going to do come the spring. So look for that. That's going to come. Also do the EEOC.
Chris, I think that's just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, good or bad, but I see it being a lot.
This spring's going to be crackers. So then we're also expecting the EEOC to come out with its final rule on the PWFA, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act.
Okay.
That was passed back in December.
Yeah. Well, why? What's going on with that? I don't remember.
So what happens when legislation is passed? Then the bureaucracies go to work, and they then draw their own determination about what that means and how they're going to enforce it. Right now, all of this may be blown to pieces if the Supreme Court reverses Chevron. So we'll see when that happens. But for right now, the Chevron case. Chevron case has to do with the primacy of federal agencies to do what they want. So in the case of the EEOC, and so I comment, or wait a minute, did I comment on this? Yes, I did comment on this also. So my concern, again, now I don't know what the final rule is going to look like. So I only know what the proposed rule will look like. The proposed rule, I had numerous problems with, largely because of the way that the EEOC was defining the term pregnant. So I'm pretty sure Congress meant a female who is actually pregnant, right? I'm pretty sure they meant that.
And what did they say?
The worker is pregnant. So their definition of pregnant is as follows. First of all, a woman who is actually pregnant. So far, so good. it would also cover any woman who had been pregnant in the past, any female who was actually actively trying to get pregnant, and how in the hell HR is supposed to ask that question without getting their face clawed off, I don't know. And then any female who is thinking about getting pregnant in the future. So all of those would be protected under the Act.
For what purposes, I guess? Like what's
the point?
Of
qualifying protection under the Act. So you're basically defining, the definition of terms is super important, right? ADA, who's an employer?
Yeah, so I've been pregnant before.
Pardon me?
So I guess I'm trying to understand if you've been pregnant before, in what instances, unless there's like some instances that maybe a woman is dealing with currently because they were pregnant at one point.
You were pregnant somewhere in the past, and so you now get the benefits of the protection under the PWFA. And you got to remember what the PWFA basically does is it's in and of itself, it probably makes it codifies and makes it deezer for the ADA portion, right? Because when you think about how we deal we in HR, there are 3 laws we pay attention to: Pregnant Workers Disability Act, or Discrimination Act, discrimination, the FMLA, and the ADA.
Yes.
And all 3 of those. The PDA protects the job, protects the opportunity, doesn't allow them to be discriminated against on the basis of being pregnant, can't affect their assignments, can't affect positive treatment, right? That's been around since 1968, for God's sake.
Yes.
So that one. Then you got the FMLA, which protects their job. And then you got the ADA, which gets them accommodations if they need them while they're at work. So do I need a close parking spot? Do I need to work on the first floor? Can I work at home? All that. So we've always, those are our 3 things that we've had to pay attention to in HR.
Yes, the interplay between those 3. Yes.
And so the pregnant workers, this act walks in after all of that is already done and says, okay, we're going to pretend we passed some really big protection law. And what we really did was fiddle around with how ADA is processed relative to pregnancy. That's I think it was. I personally,
it makes more sense now.
I personally thought the legislation was political posturing, to tell you the truth. I mean, we in HR know how to treat and know how to handle workers in this situation, and we're good at it, and we know how to weave these 3 things together.
So now that
this is a little bit more tricky. This is really another example of federal law being piled on federal law, being piled on federal law, being piled on federal law. It just goes again and again. It makes it
more confusing. Yeah. Okay.
It makes it harder for us. Makes it harder for us. But the EOC now jumps in and has a completely crackers definition of. But what I said in my comment was that if that's how you're going to define a pregnant female, it's every female in our workforce between puberty and south of menopause. That's every single.
I think I'm going to have to probably read into this a little bit more.
Well, that ship has sailed too. They've already had the comment period on the rules, so now we're going to find out what they're going to do. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is something else HR needs to really think of. This is coming out in April, or we're not sure when this is coming out.
This is April. It's supposed to be April. I mean, I kind of feel like Charlie Brown in the football with Lucy holding it. The Department of Labor said they're coming out with this. Like, this is like the 5th time. I guess I believe them. So the main reason I think what I had said all along was they got to do it before the election if they want to get any positive pop from that.
Well, because it just seems like we're really it seems like the executive, right? Well, like regulatory as opposed to
if the Department of Labor passes that, if that rule goes into effect, and let's say the floor is $65,000 or $70,000, whatever the heck it is they land on. If from a political standpoint, purely from a political standpoint, if I were the president and I was in charge when my Department of Labor did that, I'd go out on national television and said, I just gave, 20 million workers a raise.
That's true too. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true
so,
too.
so
Yeah.
that's why I was
Yeah.
expecting. That's why I said you got to get it out before the election, because otherwise, I mean, what do you?
Honestly, yeah, because
That's
especially because it'll come
bad.
in November, and yeah,
It's
one
bad
person.
politics. It's just bad
What about
politics. Right?
and then what about independent contracting? Is it independent contractors?
I completely
Did
forgot
anything
about that.
that
Yeah.
already passed,
No,
right?
so that part's
Okay.
already done. That part's already done.
That's
So
done. I think we did talk about that.
okay, so
in the last
basically
one.
what they did was wipe out all of the reforms that were done during the Trump administration. So they zeroed out that rule and rolled the clock all the way back to Browning Ferris. So we're back to where we were, you know, the multi-factor test with no one particularly having greater weight. I mean, it's an absolute mess. But yeah, they just turned on the Wayback Machine, so we just went back to 1994, 95 on independent contractors.
It's just the way that you said it, Chris. Yeah, but hopefully, and it sounds like it was confusing, a little confusing back then.
Well, for anybody that was around, I mean, put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can put it this way: the Trump administration rule that cleaned all that up wasn't enforced long enough for people to come acclimated to it, quite frankly, I think. So reversing it back is pretty much what everybody knew before. So I don't think it's as disruptive.
Okay.
In terms of understanding what the rules are. Now, making it work in 2024 with a gig workforce and so many more people working for themselves now and all this other stuff, it's not friendly to that at all. It's not
friendly to that.
No, but in fairness, if you look at the administration, and really I take this back to the Obama administration, and most people at Department of Labor also worked in that administration. They did not think very fondly of gig work. Their point of view when they saw Uber and Lyft and TaskRabbit, you know, all of these services that basically connect a buyer with a seller of service or a seller of an item or whatever. And that really got, you know, that just tore the internet, just opened that wide up, you know. So now, if you want to be a handyman, you know, you work on getting good Yelp reviews, you sign up with Angie's List, you know, whatever the heck it is, but that's how you do your work now. And that didn't exist before. And so the point of view of this administration is that those workers, because they aren't employed by anybody, they're self-employed. They don't have any protection. They are operating as individuals, which leaves them open to exploitation, and they're at the mercy of.
Of course, I'm hearing all this, and I'm just like, I'm an independent contractor, and
I know. Okay, I know. I'm not saying there isn't a different argument.
Well, but their thought process. Yeah, their thought process. Yes, their thought process is like.
And let's face it, if you're going to be effective in advocacy, you do have to be able to understand what the other side thinks and why they think. You can't just walk in and say you're wrong. Do it my way. Because that won't fly. So
that is so interesting. I wonder if they got independent contractors complain, or independent contractors were complaining and saying they were being mistreated. Maybe because
no. You know who was complaining? It was the unions. Unions can't organize.
Here we go back to that circle. Okay.
Yeah, independent contractors are the antithesis of a union, right? I'm not joining anything.
Yeah, because
I just went out and got on my own for a reason. I didn't want to have to dance to else.
Yeah, like I don't need. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, but so interesting.
If you wall that off and make them work for somebody and get them aggregated in a group, well, now they can be organized. So
that is so. But that's very helpful to know.
You have to remember this goes way back, way back. And
really deep.
Even if you look at the rhetoric of the unions today, look at the stuff that Fain says over at the UAW or really anybody else. their point of view is that the workers are exploited, period. Exploited, cheated. That's like the default thing here. If you're a worker, you're just getting hosed by the man. And the only way you're ever going to get your fair share or get anything approaching protection for your job or your treatment or anything else is you got to join a union, and we'll get more pay, more benefits, because if you're on your own, good luck. You won't get any of that. You're just going to be one of the chumps. And so that's a point of view, and they believe that very fervently down to their very core. And so you can't sit here and say, cross your arms and say, well, that's an incorrect point of view.
Yeah. I mean,
I respect where that comes from. Now, as an independent contractor myself,
yes.
I would beg to differ, but
yes,
it doesn't mean I don't see their side of it.
Where their side of it.
I'm not going to sit here and argue economically that the workers have gotten ahead on the purchasing power of their wage increases or anything they've gotten over the last 20 years. I mean, I can read a graph. I know that's not true, right?
Yes.
I know that's not true.
Yes.
So it's not as if their point of view does not come with elements of foundation, right?
Yeah, so, because I know it's been around for quite a bit, and I'm coming in on the tail end.
Let's face it, crafting public policy is trying to. I like to try to say, come up with the possible. I think when you try to solve a huge problem like immigration, you try to solve that with one magic piece of legislation. I don't see how that happens.
No,
unless you just bend the other side to your will. I am far more along the lines of saying, okay, how do we make things better for everybody, and doing so in such a way that doesn't drive that makes things marginally better for everybody without setting everybody at each other's throats. That's the kind of stuff I like to see, but that's not typically the kind of stuff you see being done. So we are a polarized nation and a polarized people, and
we don't know, though. I think a lot of us are educated in this sort of space, and because we don't know, it can cause frustration.
Yeah. So I noticed here we're out of time.
Yes. So thank you so much, Chris.
We're gonna have to wrap this. So the big headline is this spring is not going to be about what's happening in Congress. This spring is going to be about the agencies rolling their stuff out. So
agencies rolling their stuff out. So that's super cool. Thank you so much, Chris. So
sure.
What do you think we can talk about for next week not next week, or what's coming up for the next month? What's something that we can kind of look forward to?
We'll have a good view of what's moving in the Indiana General Assembly and what's likely not going to get over the finish line, right? Simply because as the counter gets shorter, there's less time to hear bills, and so we'll have a good sense of what's moving and what's not. We'll know that. I didn't even get to talk about the election or anything, so we'll pick that up next time.
Okay, so we'll
there's a lot of
maybe we'll have a little bit more stuff.
Yeah, the Indiana governor's race is really shaping up to be far more competitive than I originally thought.
Yes. Okay.
So Indiana's got 4 open congressional seats and governor up, and Indiana is going to be a happening state come this November. So we got a lot to talk about there. So
so I'm excited. Thank you again, Chris. And I know that we went over about 4 minutes, but that's okay. Great information. So I'm going to add this to the stage. Thank you for joining us today, and you will get more information about the next session. But for now, have a wonderful evening.
Great.